Harry's Wife. A Less Than Royal Narcissist, Part 45.2. These sections of this ongoing analysis enable you to understand another dynamic of the narcissist with regard to how the narcissist unconsciously perceives the threat to control as a consequence of the popularity, presentation, or appearance of another individual. In 45.1, I provided an example of how, on at least 5 occasions, the presence of the Duchess of Cambridge coming up on the radar of Harry's wife caused Harry's wife to perceive a threat to her control in her unconscious, and therefore, driven by the narcissism, need to assert control by looking to upstage the Duchess of Cambridge. Now, you might think that an individual that has millions of followers on social media would be perfectly content to think, I've got lots of followers, I don't need to be upstaging anybody. But of course, where the individual is a narcissist, they either don't realise that they're upstaging, or where they do, it's seen as justified, because the narcissism, through the perspective, creates the distorted field so that the individual, in those instances I've explained, the Duchess of Cambridge was viewed painted black. And therefore, in Harry's wife's world, she would have seen that Kate Middleton was showing off, was trying to get one over on her. Remember, the paranoia of the narcissist would suggest that individuals were trying to make the narcissist feel small, feel forgotten about. The paranoia causes the narcissist to interpret the behaviour of others as being against them, of not supporting them, of being unpleasant and treacherous, so that the narcissist is then motivated to take action in response, in retribution to the perception of that view held against them. So with regard to Harry's wife, her narcissism would in effect cause her to believe that the Duchess of Cambridge was the one that was showing off, that the Duchess of Cambridge is trying to upstage her. So the Duchess of Cambridge thinks that she's little Miss Hoity-Toit and thinks that she's Miss Goody-Two-Shoes and that everybody likes her. And therefore, driven by this belief, Harry's wife responds by retaliating and will either, when confronted, deny that there was any such step taken. No, we were just putting the pictures out. Harry takes some fantastic pictures of the wildlife, so we just publicised them. Oh, it was the birthday, was it? And of course, such a remark of saying, oh, was it that person's birthday? I hadn't noticed, again, is in that moment the assertion of control. And it showed with the birthday wishes that whereas everybody else in the royal family was putting up pictures of Kate Middleton, expressing their warmth towards her, there was just a bare message that came from Harry's wife and Harry. And where have we seen that more recently? However, is it the case that it's just the Duchess of Cambridge who gets it in the neck, metaphorically speaking, from Harry's wife? Well, the short answer is no, because page6.com and an article by Paula Froelich reported on March 7th, 2020, that Harry's wife infuriated Camilla after upstaging her with Instagram post. The article reports as follows. Harry's wife has infuriated yet another member of the royal family by overshadowing a big announcement with an ill-timed Instagram. Prince Charles's wife, Camilla, the still royal Duchess of Cornwall, was infuriated after Harry's wife posted pictures of herself visiting the Royal National Theatre on her and Prince Harry's Sussex Royal Instagram account. The same day, Camilla gave a speech at the Women of the World Festival in London about the horrific threat of domestic abuse. According to the Daily Mirror newspaper, Camilla had planned her address for a year and was apparently left devastated by Harry's wife overshadowing her big moment. Of course, it was known that Harry and his wife would be doing engagements this week, some privately, but everyone was in agreement that Camilla's speech should take precedence. Unfortunately, some people had other ideas. The website added, Harry's wife broke a pledge not to overshadow Camilla's vital campaign against abuse by demanding the pictures of her private visit to the National Theatre be published the same day. This is not the first time that Harry's wife has overshadowed her royal in-laws. The Duchess of Sussex made a surprise post on Instagram in January, which dismayed courtiers at Buckingham Palace because it appeared so soon after one by the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, promoting her child welfare campaign. And so we have another instance of the upstaging behaviour that occurs. And here it is interesting to note that there appears to have been a consensus that everybody else would limit press coverage of what they were up to allow the stage to be Camilla's with regard to a vital campaign appertaining to the horrific threat of domestic abuse. But of course, nobody else is allowed to share the stage. Nobody else is allowed to have eyes upon them. This threatens the control of Harry's wife, and therefore, first of all, overriding any agreement that was in place, sense of entitlement, lack of accountability, then issues the instructions for her own engagement to take precedence. Again, sense of entitlement, lack of emotional empathy by those affected. It also demonstrates the lack of awareness of collateral consequence. It looks rather, I understand the phrase, is tone deaf or cack-handed, that to say, I'm going to overshadow a campaign appertaining to a material matter of the horrific threat of domestic abuse towards women with, here's some pictures of me visiting the National Theatre. Now, whilst the National Theatre will no doubt have been pleased to have received a visit and some exposure, it's doubtless they would have agreed that a campaign appertaining to the horrific threat of domestic abuse ought to take greater prominence. However, the necessity of asserting control, because control is threatened by the prominence given to Camilla, means that Harry's wife's narcissism causes her to issue an instruction for her own visit to take prominence, to assert control, to nullify the threat posed to her control by any reportage of somebody else's event. And unsurprisingly, such behaviour irked or infuriated Camilla as a consequence of the behaviour. Once again, this shows the haphazard nature of the narcissism at work. The collateral consequence is that it looks self-centred and tone-deaf. It also creates a fractious relationship between Harry's wife and Camilla. But the narcissism doesn't care about this. As I explained in part 43, the narcissism is brilliant at asserting control in the moment and doesn't care for the collateral consequence. And Harry's wife narcissism continues to exemplify that and has done so throughout, through these more historic examples of the behaviour. Of course, we've seen all of this more recently, only over the course of the last weekend and the days beforehand appertaining to the death and funeral of Prince Philip. First of all, there was the announcement that was required by Harry's wife's camp that she, of course, will not be travelling to the United Kingdom because she'd been advised not to by her doctors because she was pregnant. The existence of the Duke's funeral means eyes are on him, not on Harry's wife. This threatens control, so a press release is issued in order to bring attention, fuel, and to assert control back with Harry's wife. And then, of course, because the mourning for Prince Philip was an ongoing event alongside funeral preparation and repeated commentary within the media, every time the internet was fired up or the television was switched on or people made mention of it, this was the topic of conversation, which of course continued to threaten Harry's wife's sense of control. So then it became, I didn't want to go because I didn't want to be the centre of attention. Again, making herself the centre of attention, showing the collateral consequence of, again, a rather tone-deaf and obviously contradictory remark. But the narcissism doesn't care about that. All it cares about is motivating her to nullify the threat to control that has been repeatedly posed by people concentrating on Prince Philip and the bereaved Queen. Then it became, I let Harry decide what to do, and he decided to go alone. Then it became, oh, I'll be watching at home on television. Nobody gives a rat's ass. But of course, you feel it's necessary to tell everybody that this is what you're doing, because again, that is the necessity of the assertion of control by nullifying the threat posed to the control by people's attention being elsewhere. Remember, as an unaware narcissist, Harry's wife doesn't know that she's experiencing a threat to her control. She will feel this sense of unease. She will feel the envy because her narcissism will make her feel that way. And within close quarters, she will probably comment to certain advisors about why does it have to be about them. Of course, because as a mid-range narcissist there is facade management to the outside world, this would never be said, and instead the sugary facade is created in order to make the individual look outwardly pleasant, outwardly caring, full of fake contrition, fake compassion, but the actions belie that facade, as has been repeatedly seen. Rather, as an individual operating through emotional empathy, rather than remaining silent and remaining at distance and sending a wreath quietly, unobtrusively, and respectfully, again we saw the brouhaha appertaining to, look at my wreath, my wreath's the best one. Everybody look at my wreath. Look at my handwritten note. I had a special bond, a deep bond with Prince Philip. I'd barely known him and barely actually seen him, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of my magical thinking and the need to assert control once again. And so, repeatedly, there was the attempts to upstage and overshadow the funeral of Prince Philip, providing further material which demonstrates that this is a repeated course of conduct engaged in by Harry's wife in order to assert control and nullify the threat to her control. These aren't coincidental behaviours. These are instinctive responses occasioned by the narcissism seeking out the need to always maintain control, and whenever there are repeated threats to control posed by attention being on other individuals, lacking the control of a greater or ultra, Harry's wife's narcissism prompts her to do these rather obvious and increasingly obvious self-centered proclamations of, look at me, I'm organic, I'm authentic. These are authentic attempts to move attention onto me. But of course, it must be remembered that this is all happening instinctively. With an aware narcissist, it would be far more polished, and more control would have been exercised to ensure that gaffes such as the ones that we have been talking about and referencing would not have occurred. Accordingly, the repeated upstaging that occurred, or attempts to upstage, obviously demonstrate throughout the run-up to the funeral and the funeral itself, evidenced a lack of emotional empathy, boundary transgression, the necessity of asserting control, a sense of entitlement and a lack of accountability, and various manipulative behaviours by way of false compassion, showmanship, triangulation. In part 3 of this particular section, the analysis continues, showing yet more evidence to support the proposition of what is actually going on here.